Session 14. Backtranslating the Story.
Now that you have a good recording of the Bible stories your teams crafted together, it's time to look at back-translating those stories. During this session, we'll look at how and why back-translations are a crucial step in the StoryTogether process.
Backtranslation involves translating the Bible story into a language that your checker understands. The checker is often one of the facilitators from the workshop who has biblical expertise and experience in story crafting. The checker listens to see if the story is told naturally and is biblically accurate. This isn't a perfect process, and it's certainly not seamless, but it's an important step to ensure your teams are getting accurate Bible stories told in the best ways possible.
The back translation should be as literal as possible to enable the checker to understand and evaluate what they're hearing. The story should be told orally and never written down, at least not at this point. Keep in mind that the checker may want to transcribe the recording later on to check it more closely, but for now, it's important that the story be told orally, phrase by phrase, to ensure the best possible back-translation recording.
Each team selects 2 people to carry out their back translation. One oversees the playback device while the other person translates the mother tongue story, phrase by phrase, into another language that the checker understands.
You have important logistics to keep in mind here. The person who is translating the story must be able to speak the group's mother tongue fluently and to speak the checker's language, although perfect fluency in the checker's language isn't required. If your back translator doesn't know how to translate certain words or phrases, make a note of it so that you can provide short descriptions and explanations for the story checker later on.
As a quick but important side note here, if you have to explain a certain word or phrase for the story checker to understand, ask a non-believer or a new follower of Jesus to explain the meaning. By asking someone who isn't steeped in using religious terms in everyday speech, you're ensuring your story checker gets the most accurate back translation possible.
You'll want to have the right recording and playback equipment on hand because you need to record the back translation in its entirety while listening back to each team's Bible story. You may want to use 2 separate devices to play back the team's Bible story and to record the back translation. But keep in mind that apps are available, both for Android and iOS, that enable you to record and playback on one device.
We've covered a great deal of information up to this point. Are you ready now to look into the details of how to do back translation? Let's take it step by step. To start, the person doing the back translation should listen to the Bible story in the mother tongue straight through without stopping at least one time.
Next, you want to ask one of the team members to play snippets of the Bible story, phrase by phrase, for the back translator to easily hear and remember. The back translator then speaks into the recorder using the checker's language, translating the Bible story phrase by phrase. It's a lot of play and pause, and record and stop here. But it really does help your back translator translate the story more accurately and be able to tell it more naturally in the checker's language.
Ask your back translator to clearly state what each line says as literally as possible. For example, if your storyteller says, "She loves him with all her stomach," you'll want to know that the word used in the mother tongue is really stomach rather than heart, which in this instance would have been what we'd use in English to communicate the same thing.
Keep in mind, some back translators may want to give you a summary rather than a literal translation of the Bible story. You don't want that. Explain clearly to your back translator that a line-by-line translation of the story is needed in order for the checker to do his job.
During this session, it's quite helpful to model a back translation for the large group and then give everyone an opportunity to role-play different steps in the back translation process. As you give them time to practice, you'll help them develop as story crafters who can train additional story crafters over time. Reproducing story crafters like this propels and furthers access to God's Word for all people groups. That's time well spent.